we're going to unpack quite a bit. Now, we've got an election coming up.
Mhm.
You're reaching out to all the candidates to look at getting some commitments from the candidates. Now, what brought about is this, commitment from candidates prior to being elected? Is it that there's a lot of failings as far as you can see that, obviously there's a government that's been in charge for a while, there's a minister and that. Is there some real challenges that you've found over the last sort of 4 years?
Yep. So we are lucky, I guess. I've worked really hard to connect with and work closely with as many members of parliament as I can over the years. So some of those relationships have extended through, from one election to another. So we've had really high support in the Legislative Council from people like Connie Benares, Tammy Franks, Sarah Game, Ben Hood. They're all up for re-election at the moment. So they're quite informed around child protection. However, when you have new candidates coming in, I know most people step up and run for in the election because they want to better things for their local community. So, however, so many people are unaware of the challenges involved with child protection. And that's across the board, from families who may need early intervention through to fostering kinship carers, grandparent carers, birth parents. So I thought it was really important that I connect with as many as possible. And the best way to do that, I thought, was to write up some carer commitments. Now, the election commitments were based on surveys and polls and complaints that we'd received over the years from carers, and we've consistently advocated for these things. So current members of parliament would be aware of them. Some need reminding of the importance because none of these things have been implemented over the years. And the better informed the candidates are now, that the smoother that transition is in if they're elected, and because they will hear from me and they'll hear from other carers, because we really want to pick up where we left off, and that wasn't a great space. And because we haven't achieved any of these outcomes in this last election term, despite promises made leading up to the previous election. So just quickly, previously we had advocated strongly to all members of parliament, and the Honourable John Darley, who he very strongly picked up the need for change in child protection through our advocacy, and we supported him to move through some legislation, and we instigated and achieved the independent inquiry into fostering kinship care. That was back in about 2022. Unfortunately, the appointment of the person to facilitate that wasn't exactly what Parliament had envisioned. So we continue to advocate to, I guess, the now current Child Protection Minister. She was opposition at the time. We made it clear that carers were really concerned that we wouldn't get the outcomes that we wanted. We didn't feel that that person was independent. Now, the minister promised that should carers not agree with the outcomes of that inquiry, she would conduct a review of the outcomes. However, I had heard that work had commenced on those outcomes even before we were given the report. So we called on the minister to provide us with that review process that she had promised us, and still to this day we have not achieved the review of the outcomes, and she's not provided a reason or explanation as to why she broke the promise.
Mm.
So this time, and carers are tired, carers are exhausted, they're fed up with advocating for key solutions that won't just benefit carer families, but they will benefit and achieve better outcomes for children. So we used all of that information to come up with election commitments. Everybody's receiving them. I've had some really strong responses and support coming from independents and minor parties. I'm yet to hear from the major parties.
Mm.
So We are awaiting. Last I had heard from some of the Labor ministers was that they had passed on my emails to the current Child Protection Minister, which reflects a misunderstanding of what these commitments are about. The problem we've had is that current ministers are not voting on the needs and the requests of their members of the community, and that's what they're there for. They're not there to vote for a piece of legislation, for example, just because one of their ministers has put this bill together, and especially when stakeholders are opposing it. So that's in regard to the current child protection legislation that was passed before Christmas, which stakeholders, officers such as Office of the Guardian and others, we were all opposing and determined it flawed because it wasn't thorough and it didn't reflect all of the things that we had all been advocating strongly for. So unfortunately, all of the Labor ministers voted for that piece of legislation despite the feedback from stakeholders.